Today I want to bring your attention to an underseen found footage horror movie released in 2014 called A Record of Sweet Murder. I went into this film with no expectations and was blown away. It is a real hidden gem, and given that it only has 600 ratings on IMDb and under 5K ratings on Letterboxd, which is hardly anything for that site, I'm pretty confident that most of you will never have heard of this thing. And it definitely deserves more attention. The film is set in South Korea and stars a couple of South Korean actors, but was written and directed by a Japanese filmmaker. And it also features some Japanese co-stars. So it's a cross-cultural collaboration in the same way as a film like Broker, which had Japanese filmmaker Hirokazu Koreeda heading to South Korea to explore a different angle on the themes that he'd previously tackled in Shoplifters. Both of which I also recommend if you're looking for a pair of touching dramas about found family. Very different than what we're talking about today, but two little bonus recommendations for you. In A Record of Sweet Murder, the cross-cultural nature of the production is directly reflected in the film's narrative, with some characters only speaking Korean, some characters only speaking Japanese, and the put-upon cameraman, the one who's shooting the film that we're seeing, he's tasked with pulling double duty as cameraman and translator for the other characters. If you haven't heard of A Record of Sweet Murder, fans of Japanese horror may still be familiar with the director, Koji Shiraishi. The guy's made almost 100 movies, most of which are horror, and a good chunk of those are found footage. He's the man behind projects like the Senritsu Kaiki Files, Grotesque, Occult, No Roy the Curse, Really Cursed Videos, and tons more. The setup of the film is that a journalist has been contacted by a man who she knew as a child but hasn't seen since he was sent to a psychiatric hospital for a large chunk of his life after his sister was killed. She was run over when the three of them were all out playing together as kids in the street. Now he's out of that psychiatric hospital and he's killed 18 people. He wants the journalist to come meet him at a secluded location and bring a cameraman to document the whole thing, with the condition that there be no cuts and that everything be captured in a single take. And yes, the film does deliver on the promise to showcase everything in a single shot. Now, there are hidden cuts, of course, but they're really well done, and if you don't know what to look for, there's a good chance that you won't even notice them, I think. Once the reporter meets up with this guy, she asks if it's true that he's killed 18 people, and he says, well, kind of, the real number is higher. Yes, I killed 18 people, but then I went and killed another 7 people after that. But he's not your generic psychotic serial killer. He has far more interesting motives and a truly compelling and refreshingly original goal with all of these murders. He believes that God has told him to kill 27 people while he's 27 years old, and that doing so will result in his sister being brought back to life. And that everyone he kills to accomplish this will also come back to life once he finishes what he's started. And so he's 25 kills in, he's got 2 more to go. There's a lot more that happens, of course, but I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll leave the rest of the plot a mystery for you to find out for yourself. I love found footage as a style and as a concept, but to be honest, the majority of found footage films that I try out end up leaving me disappointed. And I have seen quite a few of them at this point. Oftentimes, found footage horror films fall into the same pitfalls, and even the same rather hyper-specific pitfalls. Why are they still filming? Why wouldn't they put the camera down? That's a super common pitfall. And a lot of found footage movies either don't bother trying to justify it, or they give some total BS excuse that is not convincing whatsoever. But here, in A Record of Sweet Murder, the serial killer is the one who wants everything documented, and he tells the cameraman that he'll kill him if he stops filming. Boom, problem solved. That is the perfect justification for it. And the fact that everything is presented as a single unbroken shot really helps the senses of both immersion and realism, even though it's actually not really going for like a Blair Witch Project, this is real level of realism. It's not going for that kind of feeling. Who edited this footage is another common sense logic concern that a lot of found footage movies fall prey to. The single take gimmick gives the film a really compelling X factor that sets it apart. And I was so glad to see that the gimmick was done exceptionally well. It goes a long way toward making everything feel real with no music, no visible editing, and no distracting special effects, even once the violence starts. And they certainly don't hold back in that department. There's a ton of violence and even full-on action-y fight scenes. And all of it holds together really well considering that one-take presentation. It's extremely impressive how well everything works without cutting. The camera work is believably realistic, while also always capturing everything clearly and never relying on excessive shaky cam to hide things. It's obvious that a ton of thought, planning, and coordination went into making everything so seamless, and it rises above being a simple gimmick. Now, there have been a few one-take movies at this point, and outside of Birdman, which coincidentally released later in the same year as A Record of Sweet Murder, I honestly think this might be the second most impressive one-take film I've seen. I'm sure that won't be a popular opinion, but I found A Record of Sweet Murder's one-take execution to be far more impressive, engaging, and even more meaningful than in one-take films like 1917 or Victoria. But even if the film were presented more like other found footage movies that do utilize editing, it would still be great on the strength of its narrative, characters, ideas, and performances. Another common issue that plagues most found footage films is that they often feel stretched extremely thin to reach feature length, and they often have a lot of filler, usually way up front before the horror starts, to pad out the runtime. But again, that is not an issue here at all. The film starts with the reporter right down on the street in front of the abandoned building where she's going to meet the killer, and then the entire rest of the film is contained within that apartment. It gets going fast, and it never really slows down. What begins as an already tense situation continues to ratchet further and further up in tension until eventually boiling over into complete chaos, and then managing to sustain that energy all the way until the finale. And that finale is excellent, by the way. And another area where the film impresses is in the characters and performances. Too often, found footage movies don't really bother crafting compelling characters. They either lean on the douchebag tropes that plagued 2000s horror especially, or they just kind of make the characters blank slates to scream and get killed. Not so in A Record of Sweet Murder. It's a small cast of just 5 real characters, and all of them are interesting. The cast was given a tall order to handle so much dialogue in these extremely long takes, and they all rose to the occasion. The killer guy is especially good. You really believe his inner conflict of not wanting to hurt people, but also being completely convinced that it's what he has to do to save his sister, and that it's ultimately God's will and these people will all come back to life, and therefore it's a good thing to do. With a weaker performance in this central role, the whole film could end up crumbling around him, but luckily Yeon Ji-wook completely nailed it. The Japanese couple that enters the film partway through are so cool, and they send the film in such an unexpected direction. They're so much more interesting and distinctive than they needed to be if it was purely done for the sake of just moving the narrative along. They totally upend the progression of the plot in a wonderful way. The film takes some huge swings with these two characters, and let's be real here, those swings might not work for everyone. But I found them to be so wild and fun, and funny, intentionally funny. They're extremely memorable characters. Very cool addition to the movie. And honestly, I really have nothing but good things to say about A Record of Sweet Murder. I watched it on Halloween night this year as a last-minute substitution for a Kim Ki-duk horror film that I couldn't track down, and I was absolutely blown away. A Record of Sweet Murder gets a big old thumbs-up recommendation from me. So go watch it, and if you enjoy what I do here, you can support the channel on Patreon, where there are bonus videos and early videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. So long.